I will call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee. This day, May 15th, 2018. I'm Councilmember Reich. I chair this committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmembers Johnson, Palmisano, Bender, Fletcher, and Gordon. We are quorum, and we'll proceed with today's agenda, which has 19 items, including consent items, which I'll go through first. Any item can be pulled per the request of a committee member. Item 3 on the consent agenda is 28th Avenue South, street reconstruction project, designation of the cost and setting the public hearing, and that public hearing will be July 10th, 2018. Item 4 is the sidewalk repair and construction assessments. Item 5 is the joint powers agreement with the City of Columbia Heights for street resurfacing project. We share a border at 37th Avenue Northeast. Item 6 is the contract amendment with Rice Lake Construction Group for Fridley Softening Plant Recarbonation Improvements Project. Item 7 is the contract amendment with Alliant Engineering Incorporated for additional professional services for the 8th Street South Reconstruction Project. Item 8 is the contract amendment with Bolton and Menk Incorporated for additional professional services with the 4th Street Reconstruction Project. Item 9 is the grant from the state of Minnesota for the renovation of PB Plaza. The amounts are listed. Item 10 is the sewer service line repair assessment cancellation for 1915 Talmadge Avenue Southeast for reasons identified. Item 11 is a railroad agreement with the Minnesota Commercial Railway for the Mid-City Industrial Reconstruction Project. Item 12 is the D-Line Rapid Transit Recommended Station Plan, City of Minneapolis comments that we're submitting. Item 13, I will be pulling that item for reasons that will be identified later. Item 14 is the 20-year streets funding plan. That's a 28 update. Item 15 is the bid for the 14th Avenue Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project. Item 16 is the bid for the 2018 Minneapolis Squad Car Upfitting Kits. Does anyone wish to pull any item besides 13? Seeing none, I'll move all items minus 13. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those dissenting, nay. That carries. And item 13 is a procedural matter that was brought to our attention regarding the Bicycle Advisory Committee appointments due to a requirement that we were overlooking, a technical requirement that we were overlooking, and therefore we will follow the prescribed process by moving this item to set a public hearing for June 5th, 2018 to consider the appointments for the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and all proper notices will be given for that process. And Casey, if you wanted to just sort of highlight what we're trying to accomplish here.
That was an excellent summary, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. There we have it. Okay. All in favor of moving that accordingly, say aye. Aye. Dissenting, nay. Very good. Okay. We can now move to our public hearing. Item number 1, the 2018 Concrete Streets Rehabilitation Project Approval and Assessments. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Transportation and Public Works Committee. Our first public hearing is presented by Petro Vizzoli, who will present information on the 2018 Concrete Streets Rehabilitation in the Waite Park neighborhood. This is for project approval and assessment.
Thank you.
Petro.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Petro Vizzoli, project engineer from Transport Engineering and Design. I'm here to present the 2018 Concrete Streets Rehabilitation Waite Park Neighborhood Project public hearing. On April 13, 2018, the City Council designated the location, streets, and improvements proposed to be included in the 2018 Concrete Streets Rehabilitation Waite Park Neighborhood Project number 2308 PV108. Portions of the following streets are included in this project: Ulysses Street Northeast, Hayes Street Northeast, Wilshire Place, Garfield Street Northeast, Arthur Street Northeast, 34th Avenue Northeast, 36th Avenue Northeast. These concrete streets were constructed in 1967 and are over 50 years old. This work will extend the lifespan of these roadways. The repair of concrete streets primarily consists of saw cutting, removing, and replacing concrete joints that have deteriorated and other pavement distresses. Removal and replacement of concrete panels that are determined unsuitable for salvage will also occur. Other improvements include upgrades to select pedestrian ramps, replacement of select curb and gutter, and a diamond grinding resurfacing of the street pavement. Construction work will be coordinated with other utility improvements in the project area. The current construction estimate to rehabilitate the streets within the Wheat Park neighborhood project is $1,700,000. The proposed 2018 funding includes $1,500,000 in net debt bonds and $436,415 in assessment bonds. The assessment rates used for the project are the 2018 resurfacing assessment rates, which are 0.65 cents per square foot for non-residential property and 22 cents per square foot for residential property. We had 2 meetings with the neighborhood, one public house on March 2018 and one pre-assessment meeting on May 9, 2018. Today, we are recommending the passage of resolution ordering the work to proceed and adopting special assessments in the amount of $436,414.64 for the 2018 Congress Street Rehabilitation Wheat Park Neighborhood Project number 2308, and the passage of resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in the amount of $436,045.15 for the project. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions per the staff presentation? Seeing none, I will then open the public hearing. Anyone signed in? No one signed in. Does anyone wish to come forward and give testimony? Anyone wish to come forward and give comment? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and move the item before us as submitted. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay, that carries. We can now go to item 2, which will be the public hearing for 37th Avenue Northeast.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'll welcome Larry Matsumoto to present information about 37th Northeast Street resurfacing. Again, project approval and assessment.
Good morning.
Good morning, committee chair, members of the committee. My name is Larry Matsumoto, and I'm with the Transportation Maintenance Repair Division within Public Works. I'm here to recommend the resolution and passage of a resolution ordering the work to proceed in adopting special assessments in the amount of $28,247.29 for the 37th Avenue Northeast Street resurfacing project in the 2018 program, and to recommend the passage of a resolution requesting the Board of Estimation and Taxation authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in the amount of $28,250 for 37th Avenue Northeast resurfacing. The project limits for 37th Avenue Northeast is from Main Street to 5th Street Northeast. This is phase 1 of a 2-year, 2-phase project. For the work done for this year, the road was built in 1981 and has a PCI of 63. The total cost for the resurfacing program for this year is $8.3 million, with the special assessments for this portion of the program at $28,247.29. This project is approximately 0.38 miles in length. The project scope is a 2-inch mill and overlay with select pedestrian ramp improvements. This work will be done in coordination with the street improvements performed by the City of Columbia Heights, who is actually on the north side of the roadway. We share a common road. There is a joint powers agreement that was created for both cities to use one contractor to perform all of the improvements on this project, with the City of Columbia Heights taking the lead role with contracting and managing the contractor for this work, and the City of Minneapolis providing funds for the project. That joint powers agreement was at this committee as one of the consent items. There is no utility work or no other planned work. Public Works did host a community meeting on Tuesday, May 8th, with 18 invitations and 0 attendees coming to this meeting. The project was originally designated at this committee on February 9th of 2018, and I'm here to present this project for you today. This concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions for the staff presentation? All right. See none, then I will open the public hearing. This is for item 2, 36th Avenue Street resurfacing. Anyone signed in? No one signed in with the clerk. Anyone wish to come forward? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing none, I'll move the item as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries. And we've concluded our public hearings for the day. And we can now go to our discussion items. Starting with item 17, Your City, Your Streets, 2017 Progress Report. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I am very pleased to offer introductory comments on discussion item number 17, Your City, Your Streets, the 2017 Progress Report. In 2016, the City Council adopted a resolution that devoted $20 million a year in additional funding towards our streets in Minneapolis. This is an opportunity to make needed improvements citywide and also an opportunity for us to focus on equity for both racially concentrated areas of poverty as well as equity of modes. We feel responsible and accountable to you and to our public to give a progress report each year on the work that's been done with this investment. And furthermore, because we've adapted our capital improvement program criteria for selection, we are able to bundle together the work we've done each year for a comprehensive report back. So Liz Heyman with Transportation Planning and Programming is going to walk you through our very first 2017 progress report, which we plan to share with you on an annual basis. Here's Liz.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Reich, council members. Again, Liz Heyman, Transportation Planning and Programming and Public Works. As Robin mentioned, I'm here to walk through our 2017 accomplishments in a progress report, should have been included in your packet. Highlight some of the big numbers and big accomplishments that we saw through our 2017 projects and programs. So starting with our pedestrian improvements. In 2017, we improved 12 miles of our pedestrian realm. So that includes our sidewalks and our boulevard areas. An example of pedestrian realm that we're counting into the statistics would be improved sidewalks. You can see there in the Seward Avenue Bicycle Boulevard project. It's a bump out that was constructed as part of that project, as well as improved sidewalks and boulevard space. An example on 46th Avenue South, we've got some orange cones where those trees will come in this year. But those are the examples of pedestrian realm improvements through that 12 miles. In 2017, the city discontinued our parallel line crossing walk and replaced those with our zebra crosswalks. 3,700 of those were installed across 2017. That's almost the entirety of the city's marked crosswalks, so a really big improvement. Those zebra crossings are much more easy to see. They help pedestrians take the crossing safely, and we're really proud of that work and that accomplishment for 2017. It's a big number and a big project. In 2017, the city installed 388 new pedestrian ramps. As you can see from the table below, the large majority of those were done through our Minneapolis paving and traffic projects. However, some of those were also done in coordination with private utilities, the park board, private developers, as well as Hennepin County, and then also a handful done through our ADA standalone ADA ramp program replacement. In 2017, the city constructed 160 curb extensions. Curb extensions help narrow crossings for pedestrians at both signalized and unsignalized crosswalks. We're really happy with this number. Again, the large majority of these were driven through our paving projects and programs, with some coming through our traffic projects as well as our cooperative projects with Hennepin County and MnDOT. We think this shows our complete streets lens that we're using when we're looking at every single detail and design detail for our construction projects. We really managed to hit a high number of these and narrow up a lot of crossings for our reconstruction projects in 2017. An example of one of those curb extensions at Washington Street Northeast and 22nd Ave Northeast. You can see the curb extension there on the left side of the photo. From this aerial, it gives a little better context of the improvement that was actually made. It was a very, very wide crossing. Being able to coordinate this curb extension with a resurfacing project along Washington Street Northeast definitely narrowed up the crossing there and improved the pedestrian realm for people using this crossing every day. Another pedestrian improvement, our Samotar crossing. This is a full reconstruction of a bicycle and pedestrian-focused crossing linking Cedar Riverside to downtown. This project is being completed in 2 phases. This is a picture of phase 1. Again, an important pedestrian link addition for the city here, and adding that bicycle trail across help people get back and forth between these 2 locations within the city. Moving on to our 2017 bicycle improvements. In 2017, we installed 14.5 miles of new bicycle facilities. 7.4 miles of those were on-street bicycle lanes, 4.5 miles were protected lanes, and 2.4 miles were bicycle boulevards with a small section, 0.2 miles of shared lanes. Again, a big number here. As you can see from the map, these improvements were scattered across the city, linking up gaps in our bicycle network and putting in improvements along following our policy guidance for our protected bikeway plan, as well as the city's bicycle master plan. These projects and the mileage included here do bring into our county project partnerships as well, along with MnDOT and the Park Board. And with those 2017 improvements installed, our entire network is up to 244 miles of bicycle ways across the city. And marching onward on this graph, added that bar chart to the right side with 2017, follows our year-over-year accomplishments of adding more and more bicycle facilities throughout the city, especially with the addition of more protected lanes that helps encourage new riders to try out moving by bicycle throughout our city. Highlighting a few of these projects, the 26th Street West and 28th Street West Protected Bikeway is a 3-mile project linking in the phase to the east, going right through the heart of Uptown. It was a retrofit project, adding in our paint and bollard application, making it safer and more comfortable for cyclists to access this area. All kinds of businesses, a lot of locations, a heavily used corridor. So it was a great addition for our Protected Bikeway network. Washington Avenue South, an example of a cooperative project, this one led by the county. The Raise Protected Bikeway is a new link for downtown for people to use, and an improved bikeway and pedestrian improvements, a great addition to our Protected Bikeway downtown. 8th Street Southeast, an on-street bicycle lane project. This one we wanted to highlight in showing our coordination with our resurfacing program. We use our Complete Streets lens here to look at how we can build out our network through opportunity projects. So as these resurfacings come along, this project was coordinated to help build out our goals within our our bicycle master plan. So we like to highlight this one, showing how we're making those 2 things work together and really thinking ahead to try and get these projects rolled out. 3rd Avenue South, a protected bikeway project, connecting 3rd Avenue from on this side of the river over up to University Avenue, coordinated with MnDOT, another critical link allowing people a comfortable way to cross the river on the 3rd Avenue Bridge. Oak Street Southeast, this is our protected bikeway upgrade. It was a small segment, but we're really excited about this new application. This was taking a existing paint and bollard protected bikeway and upgrading it to a curb protected section. It's a new design this year, this 2017 for the city. It was a 2-foot wide, 7-inch high curb. We're looking at installing these at other locations across the city. So we were glad to get this small test block in, get all the kinks worked out, see how it worked, and we'll be rolling out more of these. So again, another exciting improvement with a new type of design in 2017. Getting into our street improvement projects, these are our street resurfacing, our concrete street rehabilitation, as well as our full reconstruction projects. You can see on the bottom left an example of a resurfacing project, and then on the bottom right, an example of a panel replacement for our concrete rehab program. In 2017, we resurfaced 25 miles of asphalt streets, 5 miles of our concrete rehab program, and 5 miles of our full reconstruction projects. For our full reconstruction projects, we do know we have a few tasks that have slipped into the next year. These are big projects. We have a few cleanup tasks like final pavement courses, as well as planting trees. But for tracking purposes, we're using the majority of the project that was accomplished within this year, along with its 2017, the main majority of its 2017 funding within the year as we track into the future. Focusing on the green section, the green statistics here and work accomplished in our ACP 50 areas. Our ACP 50 areas are those locations where over 50% or more of residents of people of color and 40% or more of the residents have family incomes that are less than 185% of the federal poverty threshold. You can see those locations on the right side of the map. And as Robin mentioned, these get to our focus on racial and economic equity laid out in our 20-year streets funding plan and the goals accomplished within that plan. So in 2017, we resurfaced 5 miles of streets within these ACP 50 areas, as well as 1 mile of streets, fully reconstructed streets within these areas. Approximately 23% of city-owned streets are located within these areas, 23% of streets, and both those are about 20% of our work done through those two programs. Concrete rehabilitation was the first year of that work. That work was done out in Waite Park, which was outside of any ACP 50 areas. That location was just chosen based on work history, the type of location we could scale for our programming. In the future, we do have potential concrete rehab candidates within ACP 50, so we are considering that as we move forward with this program. Again, wanting to mention our complete streets lens that we use when we choose these projects. Some of those big numbers we talked about earlier, 14.5 miles of bicycle facilities installed, as well as 160 curb extensions. The large majority of that work was done through our street reconstruction and street resurfacing programs. Just wanting to highlight that all of these things are working in concert to help us accomplish our goals through these projects and programs. Highlighting a few of our street improvement projects, 46th Avenue South reconstruction, our 42nd Avenue North reconstruction, 4th Street Southeast full reconstruction, and 18th Avenue Northeast. Highlighting the multimodal aspect of these again, we filled some sidewalk gaps in 42nd Avenue North. There are bike lanes on 46th Avenue, 42nd, and 4th Street. And the 18th Avenue includes a two-way multi-use trail on the south side of these projects. And again, some of these have a few more steps to finish up in this 2018 construction season, but looking at really great improvements for all 4 of these projects. Just a quick overview of the one-pager that you guys had in your packet, so I'd open it up for any questions.
Any questions for the staff for this presentation? Seeing none, I will just go. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you. Sometimes I just get so excited about this stuff. It takes me a minute. Thank you so much for the presentation. I had a couple questions. One was about how we're approaching pedestrian improvements. And I know that we're integrating a lot of pedestrian improvements into reconstruction projects. But can you talk about some of the more dangerous intersections in town and how we might be targeting pedestrian safety improvements to those places where we know there's a lot of conflicts, or how else we might be approaching pedestrian planning beyond the reconstruction projects?
Yes, Chair Ray, Councilmember Bender, I could answer that question for you. First of all, we have our new pedestrian safety program that was incorporated into the CIP last year. We're also using a data-driven approach looking at our pedestrian crash study that recently came out. Every time we start choosing projects or looking at projects and opportunities for grant funding or new projects to put into those programs, we start looking at those data sources first. So that's our first step in all of this. It's a data-driven approach. We're looking at those really problem areas that you highlighted. So we start there and then kind of work our way through either if it's a grant requirement, if it's the right fit and scope and timing for the next year of construction. But it really all starts with the data for those project selections.
I appreciate that so much. And then I also just wanted, we've talked about this so many times, but I just want to highlight how big of a deal I think it was that staff decided to convert all of our crosswalks in the city to this high visibility painting. And do you know how that's going? Do we have any, are we analyzing that, or do we know how that's been working so far?
Chair Wright, Councilmember Bremer, I don't have the answer on that. I can take a note on that and get back to you on that. We can report back on that question.
Absolutely. And I don't know, I mean, it's probably unlikely that we would see like a shift in crash statistics citywide from something like that, but I was just curious how we might be hearing feedback about that change. And it's completely fine to follow up. And then I just wanted to note, so I think when we make changes like this, I hear so much support from my constituents. The number one concern that I hear from my constituents is either the topic that's coming up next, snow removal in the wintertime, and speeding cars the rest of the year. And people call my office asking us to put in stop signs and speed bumps all the time, just sort of begging us to make it safer to get around the neighborhood. We have a lot of schools, parks where people are trying to get to safely. And I think when we put in these improvements, the press narrative is often, like cars versus bikes or pedestrians versus cars. And I'm curious how we're tracking the impact on cars of the improvements that we're making. It seems to me that most of the changes we're making, actually keep traffic flowing pretty well. I know that we're retiming signals often to keep traffic flowing. And so it seems to me actually we're probably improving the streets for all users without making a huge impact on how long it might take someone to drive to work or drive to school. But I'm just curious how we're tracking that piece of the overall transportation puzzle.
Chair Wright, Councilmember Bender, that evaluation work for all modes for these projects is in process every time we put one of these in. So, for example, we're looking at, again, as you mentioned, signal timing on 26th and 28th. We have that question that's come up, and we're continuing evaluating and putting in new evaluation techniques for all of these projects to make sure that we are looking at all modes. Because, as you mentioned, we do understand this is improvements for all users. And we want to make sure that we're keeping all of our transportation networks flowing as well as possible.
Mr. Chair, I might add a couple of supplemental answers. First of all, John Warchus and team have been busily installing the zebra crosswalks, and we all together have heard a tremendous amount of positive feedback. So one thing we are tracking is what we're hearing, and we have been thanked from every corner of the city for the installation of those crosswalks. And it was a tremendous lift on the part of the team, and I would like to recognize that. I think it's making a big difference. Second, I have been reviewing with Transportation Planning and Programming our new assembly and approach to before and after studies for each corridor that we look at. So it takes a few years. I wanted to note this, that to get good data that has settled out after a construction period, the best time to do it is about 2 years after you install. The team is coming up with a more formalized approach, actually has come up with a more formalized approach to completing before and after studies of each corridor. Those will become available when we're confident that the data accurately reflects what's happening out there, and we're happy to share them with you.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hammond, for this presentation. I think we are creating a really good problem for ourselves, which is that as we do these really smart redesigns, people's expectations of streets are going up, and more people are asking for more and more improvements, which is great, and we're on that path. But I think we're going to see people really wanting, now that we're seeing these smart designs and seeing how they work and seeing what bump outs are, and people are being trained to ask for things that they didn't even know, were on the menu a couple of years ago. So I think my message to you is at least partially sort of be ready for constituents coming forward saying, we really need this at this intersection and this intersection and this intersection. And I think the demand for pedestrian friendly streets is only going to go up. And that's a really good thing. And I'll also just say, it has been my perspective that, we've seen substantial population growth, and had we done nothing, I think traffic would be worse than the improvements that we've made. So I think this team deserves a lot of credit for making a lot of our streets work a lot better than they have. So thanks for this. Please keep up the good work, and we're looking forward to seeing our streets keep getting better and better.
Any other questions or comments? Great work to really highlight. It's very well presented. Graphics are helpful, but it just really just scratches the surface of all that goes into actually delivering on the results that then we quantify and have a nice presentation for. And so I want to recognize the groundwork that goes behind all of this, which is monumental. I think to Council President Bender's comments regarding, just this, when you do it, when you design it right, it should be working for everyone, despite the mode at that moment. Highly anecdotal, of no statistical significance whatsoever. But I had a complaint from a constituent, regarding some bump outs at a very high frequency MnDOT interface with some local roads on Central Avenue. And she said, I just hate taking that turn with those bump outs. They were designed wrong. And I said, so do you drive any differently when you take your turn? No. I said, you're missing the point. You're supposed to drive more slowly on the turn when you interface with a heavy pedestrian area. And so I don't think she really agreed with me at that moment, but I stand by my point and observation. And then in the example that you gave, where it was a completely confusing wide street, it was actually a remnant turnaround route for streetcars from back in the day, and drivers have been thanking me more than pedestrians. It now makes more sense where the driver is supposed to go at that intersection, let alone the local residents who rock their drivers are pretty happy too. So I think, again, not statistical, not quantified yet, but I think Council President Bender's point, if we were to examine it without sort of an ideological lens or a bias, we would see that it is working as it's designed to. So with that, I thank you for the report, and I will move the item as a receive and file. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We can now go to item 18.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, item 18 is our report back on the winter maintenance study, which has been underway for some time. I'm going to introduce this by telling you about the two components that you're going to hear about. The first component is a report on the study, which outlines a range of possibilities for both bicycling and walking winter maintenance. Matthew Dirdal is going to walk you through that. And then when Matthew is finished walking you through the contents of the study, I'm also going to invite Lisa Cerny, our city engineer and deputy director, to present information that's contained within the supplemental report that has also been provided to you. Because Public Works and you all have heard numerous comments over many years about walking in winter on our sidewalks, we felt it was important to take a deeper dive into that single topic so that we could summarize what we are hearing from the public, try to identify some of the root causes of the issues, and tell you what we plan to do in this next winter season. So there's two components, and we'll start with Matthew and the broader winter maintenance study.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Matthew Dierdal. I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator in the Transportation Planning and Programming Division of Public Works. Again, the purpose of this presentation is a receive and file of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Winter Maintenance Study. I want to thank Tool Design Group, who's our consultant on the project, and helped us through this process. The goal of the study is to identify alternative winter maintenance options that can help us enhance the quality and consistency of winter maintenance practices, and ultimately to improve the safety, accessibility, and mobility for people that are walking and biking on our streets. Just an outline of the document, there are three primary sections. The first one describes our existing practices around walking and biking winter maintenance in Minneapolis. The second documents some practices around the country, primarily in Minnesota and a few other cities in the US, as well as one city in Canada, Vaughan, Ontario. And then the third section is where we describe our alternative winter maintenance options for both walking and biking. So I'm going to start with a little overview of section 1, and we'll start with walking. City Ordinance 445 sets our policy for responsibility for sidewalk clearance. And so property owners are responsible for clearing snow and ice from sidewalks that are adjacent to properties that they own. Our enforcement process, while a little bit proactive, there is some proactive enforcement in Minneapolis. Most of it is through our 311 system, so it's complaint driven. And then the city also has a corner clearing program that started in 1995. And then in 2015, there was an intentional focus on a network of predefined pedestrian priority routes. And so we currently use the pedestrian street lighting corridors as the priority routes to start on that corner clearing. And corner clearing is primarily targeted at windrows that are left by plows to essentially punch out the curb ramps for crosswalks. Moving on, also in section 1 to the bikeways. Bikeway winter maintenance responsibilities are shared among a variety of agencies, including the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, U of M, and I think that's all. So our shared use paths and on-street protected bike lanes in Minneapolis have a level of service goal to be cleared within 24 hours of the end of a snowfall. As you know, and we just heard from Liz Heyman, we've been installing on-street protected bikeways for the past several years. And I've noticed a very positive response, particularly on social media with those new facilities. Sometimes, a lot of times people take a picture and say, cleared before the street, that type of thing. And we hear that a lot with Midtown Greenway as well. Standard on-street bike lanes and bicycle boulevards are perhaps a little more challenging. Those two facility types are cleared when the underlying street is cleared. And so there are times different levels of service because some streets are on the snow emergency routes and others are not. And then also with standard on-street bike lanes, it's especially challenging when there are parked cars if they're not on a pedestrian or a snow clear. This is the snow clearance routes because the snow will build up and so cars start to move out a little bit. Section 2 is a city agency review. This is a summary of research and interviews with 13 cities, again in Minnesota and the US primarily. And the bullets on the screen are sort of an overview of the themes that we gathered from these communities. They're wrestling with the same types of issues that we are, North American snow climates. So increased public communications and reporting methods. A lot of cities are wrestling with similar issues that we are in terms of enforcement of sidewalk clearing. I want to highlight priority networks as well for both walking and bicycling. Different cities approach priority networks in a variety of ways. Some of them use an inch threshold. So city forces may take on the responsibility of sidewalk clearance based on some type of threshold, whether it be 1, 2, or 4 inches. And those cities will often target a priority network, usually in commercial areas and that kind of thing. There are also assistance programs, similar to options that are available in Minneapolis to help people clear their sidewalk. And then again, I described it a little bit, but we looked into cities that take on either some part of snow removal of sidewalks or a full system. So moving on to the alternative winter maintenance options in section 3, the list before you describes options for walking. The short-term options on the screen describe a process with the assumption that we have the same system that property owners are responsible for sidewalk clearance, and then includes sort of a comprehensive approach to improving the effectiveness of that system. And that includes designating a winter pedestrian priority network. And you can see it on the screen, but I just want to highlight a couple that we'll hear a little bit later from Lisa Cerny, looking at our current enforcement process and ways that we can include it or improve that. And then long-term, again, are the options that describe the city taking on some responsibility or all responsibility for the sidewalk. And there's 2 different options for each of those, and that gets at whether or not we would assign some type of threshold based on snowfall inches. The next piece is the bicycling side. So there are two in the short-term category that parallel some of the things we've talked about with walking. So designating a winter bicycle priority network. And what that's about is designating a network and giving people a reasonable assurance or expectation that certain routes will be cleared by a certain time. So in Minneapolis, that could be the shared use paths and on-street protected bikeways. And we think that's important because people may go a little bit out of their way if they expect that it would be clear versus a route that may not be clear when they're commuting or trying to get where they're going. And then also developing
Excuse me, we have a question from the.
Sorry.
I just have a quick question about this. We don't have a huge number or miles of bicycle boulevards, but the ones we do have, I think, are heavily used, particularly by folks who are maybe not as comfortable riding in traffic, folks with families. And so I hear a lot about an interest in having Bryant Avenue Bicycle Boulevard in my ward be a priority plowing street as well. And I wondered if that's included in what you'd consider the winter bicycle priority network.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council President Bender. That would be the type of question that we would consider in designating a winter bicycle priority network. So currently, I think, as I mentioned, people are generally aware that our on-street protected would be cleared before. But as staff looks into that, I think that's something that we would consider. Something that we've heard a lot from our bicycle advisory committee and others as well. So, and then moving on to the longer term options for bicycling, defining standard level of service for clearing the winter priority network. That would include things like timing and just level of service for those priority networks. And then we worked with Hennepin County on a maintenance study as well over the past year or so. And one of the strategies in their maintenance study was developing a regional winter bicycle priority network. And I think that could be important especially for people that are commuting into and out of Minneapolis on a daily basis. So coordinating with Hennepin County and some of our surrounding suburbs, and then also St. Paul, I think would be important in that one. So some changes that are already in place on communications. We've been working with our communications department a lot on making sure that the communications around snow events are sort of in the forefront of social media posts and those types of things. And with walking in particular, it's not just event-based. There's freeze-thaw cycles that particularly impact sidewalks versus the roadway. Typically, when the roadway is cleared, the tires of motor vehicles keep it pretty clear. But with the freeze-thaw, a lot of times it won't have snowed for a couple weeks, but it may warm up and freeze overnight, and there's ice. So reminders via social media are helpful there as well. And then the enforcement process, again, Lisa Cerny will describe that in further detail in a moment. But this past year, we had a trial elimination of an initial inspection prior to a notice of violation, and with an effort to speed up the amount of time it takes from a complaint to when that sidewalk is cleared. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Cerny for the supplemental analysis.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lisa Cerny. I'm the City Engineer, Deputy Director of Public Works. So I just want to highlight that while we were completing the winter maintenance study, wrapping that up, the whole department really identified that we need to take a deeper dive into sidewalks. We hear a lot about sidewalks. We know you hear a lot about sidewalks. And so we wanted to put in that extra effort in that area. So we created our supplemental document. Kind of some of the themes that we've been hearing is that sidewalks aren't clear, or it takes too long, or I didn't know I needed the specific address in order for you guys to do what you needed to do, or the case was closed, but nothing's changed. And so we've been looking into a lot of those things to kind of try to understand the root causes and what we can do better. We know we can do better. And so there's a few things that, like Matthew said, we've tried. We worked to shorten the timeline. That helped, but there were also some disadvantages to that. We realized that in the process, there's a couple of different tools that we use. So 311 uses a certain software, and that software then gets transitioned to another software in order to complete the work order. During that transition, the communication to the public says it's done, it's taken care of, where really it's just moved into the next step of getting the sidewalk cleared. So there's a number of things that we identified that we can do and we can do better, and we're continuing to do those. We've also gone out and we've made some of our own observations to see what other tools can we do. Is it type of communication? Is it multi-languages? Is it people that don't have the ability to clear their sidewalks? So the supplemental document really identifies 4 key things that we want to try in the 2018-19 winter season. So the first thing is really Director Hutchison is going to be sending out a direct communication, and that communication will be all about telling the residents who have that responsibility in our ordinance today why it is important for them to clear the sidewalk, the expectation, and then also probably some tools for those that can't do it themselves. That leads into the next one. We'll work to match those individuals that have the capacity to clear snow with those that do not have the capacity, again, to make sure there are options and opportunities for them to meet the expectations in the ordinance and make sure that people traveling on our sidewalks can move around safely. We also are going to pilot proactive inspection. So like Matthew said, we have historically been primarily complaint driven. We don't think that's what we need in order to send the right message and let people know. And so with this next snow season, we plan to rotate a proactive sidewalk inspection, and again, using that as an opportunity to collect data, to know if there's other things that we can do, but also help get the message out to those that aren't getting it and aren't understanding it, because again, compliance is the most important thing for people to get around on our sidewalks. And then there's a couple of other actions, as Matthew highlighted, that were kind of in that short-term category, like increasing the awareness. How do we do that? What's a frequency and awareness campaign, as well as updating our webpage again to make sure we have consistent messages, to make sure we're clearly communicating to the entire community, businesses, residents, renters, to make sure they understand what their role and responsibility is in this. And then move forward. This is not in the supplemental, but with the short-term bicycle options as well. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for the presentation? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a staff direction that I've authored with you. Do you want me to hand this out now, and should we take this up now? Sure. Perfect. I'm going to pass this down. So I have a staff direction directing Public Works to implement the options recommended for action in the supplemental winter maintenance report and return to TPW with the feasibility and cost estimates for snow removal from city sidewalks, including possible tiers of implementation and consideration of business models that would further enhance the city's goals for a walkable city in winter, and taking into account the priority areas identified by the PAC. Staff will return to this committee in September with feasibility and estimates, and in May of 2019 to report out implementation of short-term items. Just to speak to this, and I greatly appreciate the chair's partnership on this amendment, as well as our director of Public Works. This is an issue that I know I'm certainly passionate about, many residents are passionate about, and I'm sure many of my colleagues are passionate about, and I appreciate the presentation as well. We have winter every single year for half the year, and we recently had the Super Bowl here, and we are branding ourselves as the bold North, and I think that frankly our condition of our sidewalks are probably the biggest barrier for really enjoying the winter and accessibility in our entire city. And I think, and I know we can do better, and I'm glad to see the supplemental report. I will note I personally lean towards an even more aggressive approach, and I know though that this is trying to strike that balance, so I appreciate the thoughtfulness of this approach by staff. I'd personally like to see, for instance, small fines immediately for individuals who are in violation of sidewalk clearing, $10 or $20. It's not enough to bankrupt a low-income or fixed-income individual, but is enough to catch people's attention and really increase compliance overall, because today it's kind of like the Wild West with sidewalks. We have so, when it snows, people reasonably expect I've got to move my car, otherwise I'm getting ticketed or I'm getting towed, and our streets reliably get plowed. But with sidewalks, it's up to each individual. It's up to individual neighbors to report other neighbors. We're not proactively taking care of this, and the end result is that it gets so overwhelming that I know when I talk with Director Hutchison about this, I've given up calling 311 because I can't make it more than 2 blocks without having to essentially be on the phone the entire time with 311. And it's just a huge burden on residents to try to ensure that sidewalks are reasonably cleared, which is a reasonable expectation for our city. And so I'm excited that this is a priority for Public Works and that this is something Public Works is really going to step up and take on. I would encourage the thoughtfulness of even more aggressive approaches, and am excited to see the report back on what we could do potentially with citywide clearing by our Public Works Department. So thank you for the partnership, Mr. Chair, and to our director on this.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you. I think I support the staff direction. I wouldn't mind discussing the whole thing a little bit longer, so maybe I can tie it into the staff direction discussion. One of the things I'm concerned that might be missing, so the first short-term pedestrian winter maintenance recommendation was to designate a winter pedestrian priority network. And that doesn't seem to be checked off as something to pursue immediately. So that appears to be left out of the staff direction. And I think it would be enormously helpful if we came back in September and we had some idea of what we thought the priority network should be. I don't know how difficult and challenging that would be to identify. I think everyone will think the snow emergency routes are priority network that's identified for automobiles. And it's like, how could we? I just think it's something we have to get to quickly. I think clearly there are some areas in the city where more people walk and need to walk in the winter to get to mass transit and to use transit. And I'm assuming, because it's a recommendation, that we don't actually have a priority network identified yet. But also in the staff direction, it talks about priority areas identified by the PAC. So maybe I can just hear back a little bit about how that's connected to our priority network, or how hard it would be to come back with some recommendations on a priority network. And so, or actually, I prefer to hear about how easy it would be to come back in September.
Here we go.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, the pedestrian priority network would definitely be part of the scenarios and the work that we would do on the citywide clearing process. That is where the details would come in, prioritizing which of our many miles of sidewalks would go first and how that would be accomplished. And as we think through that, we would use the Complete Streets Guideline to help us identify, like you mentioned, the bus routes, probably schools, things like that, that would be first on the list of clearing.
And so, and then just to clarify, yeah, you referenced the PAC language. They have very great insights and guidance that obviously we're instructing them to follow.
So the assumption then is in September we'll get a lot of information about that, including costs.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, that would have to be part of that citywide approach. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And just generally, I really appreciate this coming forward and giving us something to look at. I appreciate seeing the other cities and what they're doing. I actually think that our main obstacle in getting this done is going to be cost. And so that's the thing I think we have to think about in terms of I think it would be within our grasp to provide a lot more pedestrian access throughout the winter if we had the resources to do so, whether we contracted out with others to help us or we ended up taking that task on ourselves. We see how we can rise to the challenge on protected bikeways, on the off-street bike paths. Certainly, we get a lot of complaints about snow plowing the streets for the cars and the other vehicles, but we also do an amazing job and that priority there. And I would think that there's an expectation growing that we should raise the level of service up so that our sidewalks are at least comparable to the bikes or I think even the vehicles. It seems like there might even be a lot of people that would be willing and able to put that on their utility bill if they thought their front sidewalk is going to get cleared the day after it snows, and I'm willing to pitch in and do that. Or they might even be willing to put a little assessment on their utility bill if they knew that, oh, the city's going to provide some snow clearing for my neighbor down the street who can't do it him or herself, and so that I'm going to have access to this. I think this is an investment. If we look at the cost and look at how it would be if we spread it out to all of us, that we'd say it's something worthwhile for us to take on as a community so that we could provide this service and have something better going on in the winter. And I'm going to refine that little pitch as we move forward so that by the time we come for that decision, it's just going to be a slam dunk to convince everybody.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just say I'm glad to hear that you got some positive feedback on the bike lane snow removal. I need to figure out who you follow on Twitter because I will just say, and I want to name, and I don't want to do this in the spirit of complaining, but I do want to do it in the spirit of sort of adding urgency to this and making sure that everybody hears this and I think is on the same page that we are building a spectacular city for pedestrians and bicyclists and transit riders to be able to get around, to be able to access a lot of services in their neighborhoods. And with that comes an incredibly heightened set of expectations around the ability to actually do that. That I think there are some things in this report that identify just significant gaps that when we say them out loud are actually just not okay with people. And so I think it's really important that we sort of recognize that and know that, because I'll just say the constituent feedback that I got was very, very clear that we are not meeting people's expectations, right? So one of the things that I think we need to do is figure out how do we articulate a set of expectations that are realistic, that everybody can share, right? Because I certainly also had people who, after we had, one of the biggest snowstorms in 7 years, tweeting pictures at me 4 hours after the snow stopped saying like, this bike lane's not cleared yet. And I was like, well, okay, like it's probably a reasonable expectation that when we get a 7-year snowstorm, it might take a day or two to dig out, right? Like that's probably a real thing. But at the same time, I also saw things where there were bike lanes that were completely inaccessible 3, 4, 5, 6 days after snowstorms on major transit routes that were very frustrating. I'll say I'm someone who gets around a lot by walking, so I'll talk about corner clearing. I think that's a very, very important thing. In the report right now, corner clearing is listed as something that commences after the snow emergency, so that means we're waiting 3 days before that process even starts. Now, I understand why you don't want to do it before snow's getting piled on, back on the work that you're doing, but at some level, I mean, I just cannot tell you how many big mounds of snow I had to climb over to get to work. And I know that that's only going to be possible for some people. I certainly didn't feel comfortable with some of the situations I got put in as a pedestrian, and I get around pretty well. So I would really encourage that that's something that we need to look at in a much more timely way than what's offered in this report. Transit stops, I think, is another area where I was interested to see that the city of Madison takes responsibility for that. I think the notion that right now we have 3 different accountable agencies between the bench providers and the transit and the city, I think is completely evidenced in the inconsistency of the way bus stops are treated, and it's really frustrating for bus users to Again, be trying to figure out which snow pile do I climb over to get to the bus. That's something that we really want to see managed in a different way. And if we need to negotiate something with Metro Transit so that we take responsibility for it or delegate responsibility to them or whatever needs to happen, I'd be very supportive of a recommendation that says, like, somebody's going to own this. And we're going to figure out a way to make that happen. I also wanted to circle back, Mr. Dirdall, to you mentioned the snow melt, the melt cycle, the sort of, and I'm wondering about that because I'm not even clear in ordinance whose responsibility that is. You mentioned like social media reminders. That's like a reminder to who? What is a property owner's responsibility if 2 weeks after snowfall, a lot of snow melts onto the sidewalk and then it freezes and every sidewalk is icy? Do we even have a plan to do something about that? Is that something that is addressed by any of our plans, and would people know who's responsible for it? Because I'm really confused about that myself.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, thank you for the question. I'll take a shot at that and then look to Mike Kennedy to make sure I get it right. I believe it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain the sidewalk clear of snow and ice year-round, and so the responsibility would still fall on the property owner. I'm also aware of times where if the freeze-thaw cycle is particularly bad, our inspectors may issue sand orders instead of clearing it if it's sort of physically like impossible or very challenging to remove solid ice. Sand may be an option until it thaws. Did I get that right, Mike? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But in ordinance, our standard is 24 hours after the snowfall stops. So if an event occurs that's not related to snowfall, how do homeowners know that it's their responsibility?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember, that's a good question as well. I think the 24-hour time period is sort of a grace period from when it snows to when it needs to be clear, but it is supposed to be clear beyond that as well.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, in the ordinance, it talks about both snow and ice. So it's clear in the ordinance that the responsibility is still the property owners. And like Mr. Dierdal said, the city does provide sand to residents when we know that it is difficult for them to get all of the ice out of the way in order to at least provide a little bit of a grit in order to reduce the slipperiness of that sidewalk. So
that's great. So thank you for your answers to that, and thanks for the time to respond to this. You're asking all the right questions, so let's make sure we keep asking them and ask them with urgency. I'm supportive of the staff direction because I think it asks us to do that and to start to put some costs on this so that we can have a really what are we going to do kind of conversation. And I just want to really say it is my expectation, and it is something that I really want to support and figure out how to make happen, that this coming winter goes better than this last winter did. And let's make sure that we aren't pushing solutions that are 3 years off. I want to make sure that we're actually getting better this winter. And I'm looking to you all to let us know how we can support that work. Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for allowing the time for this discussion. As we have all noted, we get a lot of questions and concerns about this from constituents. I do want to say that we also get questions and concerns about street plowing, and we hear frustration from folks that we're not moving fast enough on that, or even that that the tow trucks are coming too aggressively or not aggressively enough. And so it's just, winter is just hard, and I know we are all doing our best to get through the season. It feels to me that it seems important to separate out the bicycle network from the pedestrian network because they're really different. And so on the bicycle network side, it seems to me that we're in pretty good shape. We have the equipment that we need to plow, the special facilities that we're building, and we have a plan that we're considering to do a priority network, which seems to me like a great idea. Is there any reason that those kinds of improvements couldn't be ready for the next winter season on the bicycle network side? So a priority network in place and a commitment to improvements in how we're plowing that bicycle priority network? This is an honest question. Not a trick question.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, we agree with you. We do that today. I think the key is really to all of this, like you've all mentioned, is communication. And so I think it's how do we tell people what we're doing in the time frame that we're doing it. And I think that's where we can improve the most. And we do have, we know where we're going, so let's tell them.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember, I just would like to add on to that there are items that are listed that are within our reach today with the budget and structure that we have. And there are items that are listed that we should evaluate further if it will require us to move resources from something that we care about today onto something else. And so our analysis really needs to take that into account, and that will be part of what we report back to you.
And I mean, I appreciate that very much. And I think you'll find a lot of support in the council to find the resources that we need to make sure that our bicycle and pedestrian network systems are working well in the winter. So I hope that we can see that as we're considering this upcoming budget so that, again, we're ready for next season for the bicycle side. On the pedestrian side, it seems a lot more complex to me. And I've talked with you, Director, and you, Ms. Cerny, about the kind of push and pull of how we're going to approach improvements to sidewalk clearing. And I think it's important to remember that, you know, we take responsibility for clearing the streets, but it takes us 3 days to clear all of the streets in the city of Minneapolis, starting with the priority network and then going to the even and odd streets. And so even if we were able to find the resources to take on clearing all of the sidewalks, which we seem to be significantly larger than other cities that do that approach, it would likely take us many days to do that. So we might not actually see improvement on the street for pedestrians, which is our intention. So on the one hand, when I have constituents say to me, the city plows the street, this happened, I have a disabled child, my constituent was telling me, who isn't able to get to the bus. We chose to live in this part of town because we are dependent on the bus to get him around. We need the sidewalks cleared. Why aren't you doing more? I mean, we hear a lot of compelling stories like that, and we know we need to do better. But at the same time, the city taking on responsibility for clearing all of the sidewalks in the city might not actually get us to a better condition on the streets. So I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the way that you're taking kind of multiple-pronged approach to figuring out how we get to that condition, which is ideally sidewalks clear and passable for everyone as quickly as possible. And so right now our rule says that the property owner needs to do that within 24 hours, which is faster, again, than a lot of the cities that are plowing sidewalks as the city itself. Obviously, we're having a lot of problems with compliance and enforcement. And so that's where I think, again, in the spirit of trying to get to improvement winter by winter, I'm just wondering what you think on the pedestrian side is realistic for us to start thinking about for this coming winter. And it sounds to me like it's, again, this idea of looking at a priority network and understanding how we can start to see where the city might have more aggressive inspections on a priority network, or where we might, as a city or in partnership with our business associations, start to take on more of that responsibility, but likely not citywide, likely on this kind of identified network of priority corridors. Does that sound like what I'm hearing from the report and where you're going?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, I would say not quite. And so I'd like to clarify what we plan to do this year. There's no doubt in my mind, and this is true of staff, that one of the root issues that we are seeing is that we are reliant on a complaint-driven process whereby neighbors must tell on each other. I believe strongly that we are only getting a fraction brought to our attention, and that there are many, many, many other sidewalks that are left uncleared because people don't want to tell on their neighbors. So the first thing that we are interested in doing, because we can do it quickly, this winter, is piloting proactive inspection. And instead of relying on neighbors telling on neighbors, that we look and see where the violations are. I believe that this is a very fast, I don't want to say easy because everything takes a lot of work, but doable pilot for this year, that as we're working on these much bigger picture items that we know you care about and we will return to you with more information, we will gear up for a pilot we think we can handle that will start to address the root problem. And then at the same time, we are going to be discussing priority networks, the criteria by which they are selected, which the PAC has given us a running head start on, and you will be receiving more information on that as well. But the very first thing we really want to do, communicate better, start another pilot this year that's focused on proactive inspection, and try and match people who need assistance with those who can provide assistance.
Very good. Councilmember Gordon?
And I suppose if there was something else in the budget, you could probably do something more than those next year. So I think having a report back in September does give us an opportunity. I also think that a lot of times it isn't the issue of compliance, isn't it because somebody's a scofflaw or somebody doesn't care? It's an issue of capacity. And I think there was a day when we said, take care of your own garbage and haul it off and dump it somewhere, right? And we thought everybody should be able to handle that. And then it got to be this capacity issue, and people couldn't really do that in a competent, responsible way because they didn't have the capacity. They didn't understand it. And so we looked at, well, how can we help and organize that and make sure that it happens in a good way? I would love it if we had the inspections, but then we also had some kind of opt-in option for people. And we said, okay, and we'll hook you up with this outfit to do it, and we'll make it real easy for them to get the money so they can take care of or whatever it was. I think it would be good if instead of our proactive inspections, meaning, and now we're going to hit you with a great big hammer over your head, take a bunch of your money, and then have you pay for some contractor to clean up your sidewalk. We had more that we could offer people so that we were building capacity as a community to keep our sidewalks clear for all of us.
Councilmember Fletcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the recognition of communication as a part of this. And I'll say I got one, I think, really interesting piece of feedback from a constituent that I'll share, which is that in our communication about snow emergencies and in all of our graphics about snow emergencies and in all of the ways that we talk about snow emergencies, we only talk about cars. A snow emergency in terms of our constituent communication is telling people where to park. And I think it'll go a long ways towards helping people understand the complete system if our snow emergency communication is giving guidance to bicyclists and pedestrians about where we're at in the process, what happens on day one of a snow emergency for every mode of transit. And we make that a part of our communication, that the city's constantly recognizing the ways that we're a multimodal city. I think would be a huge help. So I'd encourage us to think about that as we think about next winter. Thanks.
Good point. I think all these suggestions are well taken and give good advice and direction to the work that's before us. And I think it's pretty clear that this is a big deal. I mean, that is just fundamental to our civic functionality. We've got to get this one right. And I appreciate the fact that we're moving forward forthrightly. There's an iterative component to it. We've formalized and clarified that in the amendment, and I think staff is fully prepared to be engaged with policy and constituent and that interface between the two as we move forward. I know we have that iconic graphic of the plow, the red and white plow, so I don't know if there's an iconic graphic in the work for the good citizen shovel, but we work on that. But I also want to say, by way of a sort of a PSA, in our zeal to do clearance, don't oversalt. And we have a lot of graphics and instructions around that on several different websites, but just felt that was important to mention, even though it's a warm spring day in Maine. All right, with that, I will move this forward with the amendment. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to mention this earlier during the presentation on Complete Streets, and I just want to say, I want to thank you for your leadership on these issues. When I think back to 4 years ago, we have come so far, and I think there are 3 or 4 big reasons for that. Number one, we created this transportation planning division at the city that's leading all of this work, and it is making a huge difference in how we're planning and designing our streets. It was a significant budget investment, and you led that, and I really appreciate it because I think we see the dividends like every day, day in and day out. Since number two, we've put specific budget investments for pedestrian and bicycle safety in our budget every year for the last 4 years, and that's how we're building all of these amazing projects. Number 3, we passed a complete streets policy, and we gave very clear direction to staff that we really mean it, that every time we look at our roadway, we want to think about all users and emphasize pedestrian and bicycle safety and transit efficiency. It's making a huge difference when we see the pictures of all these amazing projects that are getting built. That's policy direction that this council took. And 4th, I just think our staff is doing an incredible job, and we've asked so much of you, and we're asking more and more, and we see how hard you're working and appreciate it so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I don't think we would ask so much if we didn't think they could deliver. So, all right. So with that, any further conversation? All in favor of this item as submitted with the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries. And we can go to our final item. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I am very happy to share with you in support of 2018 Public Works Week. We are asking for the passage of a resolution. But first, we want to show you a few videos that highlight some of our work at the department. These were produced by Kim Brown with Communications and by Patty Day, the Communications and Outreach Coordinator for Public Works. Wait, don't start yet. These videos exemplify why we celebrate Public Works Week. We are about 1,000 employees strong in Public Works, and we perform services citywide. We do it with pride, and we always do it because we feel strongly about making Minneapolis better. We do it through collaborating, responding, and improving the conditions around us. We are so, really, every time we get one of these videos, there's this amazing buzz all over Public Works about how great it is and how it really tells our story. So in support of Public Works Week, we'd love to show you these 3 videos. The first features Katrina Kessler, who's here with us today, Director of Surface Water and Sewer. And I'm just going to let the video speak for itself.
My name is Katrina Kessler. I'm the Director of the Surface Water and Sewers Division within the Department of Public Works for the City of Minneapolis. We are in the storm tunnel 80 feet below the ground surface. We have a system of 600 miles of storm pipe, many of which drain to deep storm tunnels like the one we're in. Many of the tunnels are too small, and so we're making them larger, and at the same time making sure that the tunnels are structurally sound. We spend millions of dollars each year reinforcing, rehabbing, and reconstructing sections of the tunnel to make sure that we have capacity to serve the city for another 100 years.
The second video that we're going to show you is a video of Nick Bounds highlighting his work as a blacksmith, creating custom tools and parts for the water division.
Hi, my name is Nick Bounds, and I'm a blacksmith at the Water East Side Yard. I gotta let it get warm enough so I can make the cut. I make all the tools and parts that can't be bought for the jobs that we do here at the City of Minneapolis Water Works. Some people think of a blacksmith as a person that puts horseshoes on horses. That's a farrier. Here it comes, there it goes. A blacksmith is one that creates tools out of iron. Here it goes. It's an old city, 150 years old, and there's a lot of things that need to be made. All right, Rick, coming your way, man. One of the things I do is work with Rick, and we work on hydrants together. Right now we're working on a hydrant that we're gonna rebuild because it's an old hydrant, can't find parts for it, and the easiest way to do this hydrant is to rebuild the inside of it, put it back together, and have them just screw it back in to the ground. Absolutely, I'm proud of what I do. I like the fact that
Uh-oh. Okay, well, Nick loves his job. That's what he was about to tell you in the final moments of that video, and maybe perhaps we'll just skip to video 3, which is a time lapse that shows our work to switch out the city's fleet to prepare between seasons. Go ahead. So we hope you enjoyed those videos and the demonstration of our work as we head into Public Works Week. And we hope that you will all be able to join us at one of our facilities as we celebrate the work of Public Works. And Councilmember Chair Reich, I will turn it back to you.
Madam Chair. And yeah, just want to make sure that we're aware that this is Public Works Week. And we want to pass a resolution that recognizes this week, declaring the week of May 20th, 2018 as the National Public Works Week. And I do have a resolution, or is this for today or for the full council? Okay. And one moment, please. Here we go. So one of those times where if we had nice sounding music to take care of the dead time. So here's a resolution of the City of Minneapolis, signed by all members of City Council, declaring the week of May 20th, 2018 as National Public Works Week. And whereas the Public Works Association will celebrate the 58th Annual National Public Works Week, which will be held on the third week in May with the theme, Public Works Connects Us. And whereas the National Public Works Week is a celebration of the employees who play a crucial role and are dedicated in strengthening our community, designing and maintaining infrastructures, and improving the quality of life. And whereas the Public Works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are vital to the importance of a sustainable and resilient city. And whereas Minneapolis Public Works employees maintain thousands of miles of streets, bikeways, sidewalks, water, storm, and sanitary pipes, bridges that connect us. And whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewers, streets, and solid waste collection. And whereas the health, safety, and comfort of the community greatly depends on these facilities and services. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, construction, are vitally dependent upon the efforts and the skill of the public works officials, whereas the efficiency of the qualified, dedicated personnel who staff the public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitudes and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, be resolved that the City Council of the City of Minneapolis, that we acknowledge the significant daily contribution that employees within the Public Works Department of the City of Minneapolis provide to the citizens and businesses throughout the city during this National Public Works Week. I guess this is a big, long thank you for your work. And so I submit this for your approval as our formal declaration. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries. Thanks. Thank you. We are adjourned.